We go up about, 70 feet up in the air. I've got my hard hat on. It's just me and the superintendent. And it's the end of the day, so no one else is in the facility. And we just finished, and it was quiet. And I had this moment where I looked around and I realized it was in existence because of the decisions so many people had to make, so many people smarter than I was, so many people who had to work together and as a team and collaborate and solve a problem.
Today in the studio, we have Meg Tidd. Meg is a hands-on leader and the CEO of VIP Structures, where she leads a vision focus on finding a better way for all people, community, and the planet. Before stepping into her role as CEO, Meg served as a CMO and COO for 8 years. Meg is the board president for the Gifford Foundation, a member of the Downtown Committee of Syracuse, a CNY Business Journal, 40 Under 40 honoree, and a graduate of the Leadership Greater Syracuse. Meg, excited to have you on the show.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much.
That's a lot of titles you have there, Meg.
Sure is.
If it was any longer, I don't think it would fit in our teleprompter,
No.
and then I was really be SOL.
Mm-hmm.
So you've done a lot of things. I've actually read that you actually have a very interesting start to your career and how to find yourself here. So for those who don't know, talk to me about some of the interests that you had and how you ended up finding a passion for business.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start from the beginning, actually. School was not easy for me. So high school, middle school, elementary school, it was all super hard. So when I was finishing up school, I had to figure out really what was next. And I just happened to sort of find a place in music and ended up deciding, hey, maybe there's something here, in lieu of not really having anything else to plan on. So I followed the dream of music and performing music. So I was a classical vocalist, went to school for classical vocal performance, received a bachelor's in vocal performance, and loved it, learned a lot. In many ways, that is singularly the one thing that prepared me the most for my job today, and many reasons for that. But I, upon graduating from there, it was really tough to find a job just about anywhere. You show up and they're like, explain to me why you want to go from music to this. I don't totally understand or follow. But eventually I landed jobs. I worked at temp agencies. I worked eventually as a receptionist at a not-for-profit, and then sort of worked through the ranks, became, teamed with their marketing department, did PR communications, and eventually managed a portfolio of donors. So I say all of that just because what ended up happening was I loved my job. I loved business. I loved marketing. I loved the PR communication side of things. And I was planning on applying to graduate school for music and eventually going on, the Met and, the biggest opera stages. And that was my future. And my boss's husband at the time said, hey, I really think you've got a knack for this business thing. Why don't you also apply to the business school? And many people have heard me say this, but me being me was just kind of like, yeah, why not? Let's apply to both. Let's see what happens. And sure enough, I, in a very strange twist of fate, got waitlisted to the music school and accepted to the business school. It was the biggest relief I have ever felt. I was doing music because I didn't know what else to do. It was really the one thing I was good at. And what I found in business school was, although it was exceptionally hard, there were a fair few tears, if I'm being totally honest. It was something I fell in love with, predominantly corporate strategy, and really just constantly looking at business and figuring out, how do we tweak this? How do we make it better? How do we, turn up the good, and, push away some of the negative and really make the best that we can possibly make it. So that's where I fell in love with it, and then sort of just stumbled into coming back to our company, family-owned company. I am second generation of that family-owned company, and my dad asked me to come back, and it wasn't a complete, yes, this makes a lot of sense. It was how do I feel about this? What's this going to look like? But the joy for me was that I got to take what I loved on corporate strategy and apply it to the company. And where I thought that was what I was going to fall in love with, what I ultimately fell in love with was the people and the incredible humans that work at the company, and continue there this day. The problem solving that happens at the company, it's every day is sort of like corporate strategy, to be quite honest with you. Every day is this, okay, we have this project. It's a huge puzzle. what do we do now to make it the best possible outcome that we can make it.
Yeah, that's great. Where did you start off? What position did you start off at VIP?
Marketing intern. So we didn't really have any sort of social media presence. At the time, our website hadn't been touched. I think they told me since like the early 90s. So a lot of work had to be done. So I just came in while I was actually at grad school. I was full-time grad school, full-time intern, traveled back and forth between Rochester and Syracuse, and learned the ropes that way.
And then, so what I find interesting about this is I want to hear about all these different positions that you held and how your journey helps you today in your day in and day out task. So going from a marketing intern, what skills, what things did you learn there that either apply to being, CMO, that's an easy transition, but the COO and then also CEO, what are some of the skills, some of the things that you learned from being in marketing that translates to being CEO?
Super interesting. I think one of the things I learned very, very early on was that the best companies have marketing at the heartbeat of what they do. A lot of times companies tend to view marketing and sales and marketing as a necessary evil, sort of this thing that we must do in order to keep the doors open. But if you can incorporate it in a very human and very impactful way into the day-to-day operations, it will have that much more of an impact on the growth of the company and where the company is going and how the company is seen from the outside world, brand awareness, all of those things. So for me, having the background in marketing actually really teed me up for all of the positions that I held, because I do genuinely believe it's the one thing that no CEO should ever take their eye off of. Secondarily, I think a big piece for me was the realization that you can have all the sales and marketing that you want, but if you don't have the infrastructure as a company and the operations in place to support the growth, then you're going to sell yourself into crisis. And so it was really important to me to understand, yeah, I can sell, we can sell, we're really good at that. But if we can't support that growth, what's the point? That, in many ways, tarnishes your brand more than anything. So it was a natural transition to go from marketing to operations, and then where I am now.
Yep, absolutely. I think that's great. So many different ways I want to take this, Meg. Okay, I'll kind of stick to my script here. So the marketing, I think, is a very interesting word, because to me, marketing means so many different things. I'm really big on experience. What is the experience that someone has when they work with a company? What do they feel? Was it a positive experience or a negative experience? Because sometimes that's actually better or can determine how they feel about the outcome of the product. One of the things I say here is I was just talking to a bunch of students the other day, and if you look at all of our Google reviews, all of them say, great to work with, fantastic to work with, great people, I really like this person, I really like that person. None of them actually say highest quality video production in Syracuse, because the outcome is different than the experience. And I find, to me, that's marketing.
Yeah.
I find all of that marketing. And you talked about how the people are so exciting to you for working at VIP, and you're really passionate about the people. I also know you went through a rebrand. So I don't really know what my question is here, Meg, but I just want to talk about marketing and what that means to you as far as like structuring the company.
Yeah, I'll tie it into, in lieu of not having a question and where I think this could go in a really awesome way. I'll tie it into this. One of the things I said for a really long time was, and to the people, like at the end of the day, the companies that are going to want to work with us are going to be people that want to go grab a beer with us. They want to actually spend time with us. And yes, we have to produce an excellent product for them, but that's a given. Honestly, that should just be a given for what we're doing. But you have to have people at the company that they want to spend their time with. You have to have the right people at the company that it goes beyond just designing and building a building for them. And I think part of the reason we've been really lucky as an organization and why we continue to attract those types of people has a lot to do with our beginnings has a lot to do with who we've been since day one. So again, I have this incredible opportunity where I got to step in as second generation, but prior to my stepping in the CEO position, there were 45 years of incredible history, incredible reputation, incredible marketing and brand, and all of that goodness. So my job was to say, okay, what now? Where do we go now from here? And a huge reason why that history existed was because when Dave Nutting, our founder, founded the company, and I've told this story many times, but when Dave founded the company, this community supported him in a way that he jokes around and says they otherwise probably shouldn't have supported him. 23-year-old kid, Wellesley, Massachusetts. He had no connections here in the area. He just had this dream. He had this vision that the industry really shouldn't be blown apart at those major junctures. So if you're going to sign on for a project, why would you hire a different designer and hire a different construction company and hire a different property manager? So from day one, he just set out on a mission. And yet Syracuse and the central New York community were willing to trust him with their projects, give him bank loans, give him product on credit, and employees were willing to work without always having the promise of a paycheck. He genuinely believes we wouldn't be the company we are today if he hadn't received the support from the community in the way that he did then. When I stepped in and said, okay, what now? Yes, we're a generational family-run company. That by itself brings a weight, but a really beautiful weight with it. Not a heavy on your shoulders, but really a legacy. What sort of impression do you want to leave on this world? But the question was, okay, what now? Where do we go? And I talk lately a lot about this concept of like turning up the volume on the good, because for a long time I said, let's change the world. We have an industry to change. Let's change the world. Where are we going? But at the end of the day, it's not so much that, it's just emphasizing all the good that's out there and what part do we play in that? So when we talk about that future, and we talk to our employees about that future, what role can they play in that? How can they better support our clients in that space? Because our clients want to be doing the same thing. They want to have a better impact. They want to have a stronger impact. So we seem to keep getting these incredible employees who come not just to do a job, but to come and do more, do better. And I think that has been really core to our marketing, core to our brand. To your point on experience and client experience and what does that look like and what does it feel like? We just want our people to walk away feeling like they have a genuine partner, and that what they're doing is tremendously impactful, and that we hear them. And that's an interesting thing, because I have learned in my many conversations, and I have been on the receiving end of this, and don't know if you have been too, where you go into something and you're telling someone what you want and they don't hear you. They've got their own idea and their own vision and no, we have to hear them and then offer them everything that we can. So anyway, I don't know where I was headed with that one, other than the fact that we have really great people who at the end of the day are those people making those connections. And we're only as good as the incredible humans that choose. And that's the other thing. We have people who choose to work with us. It's not us hiring them and they work for us. They choose to come and work with us every day. And that is a gift they give us.
At what point did you learn that? And I'll give you a little background here. So when I first started the company, I was just like super excited that people wanted to work with me. Oh, you want to work with me? Like, cool. Like, you trust me? All right, fine. Like, you're on board. Let's go. Right. And then I was just like, oh, people want to work with 325 because 325 is cool and it's all great. And then it did kind of switch for me. It's like, okay, no, actually, I work for everyone that works at 325 because, one day I can show up and none of them are here. Like, that could very easily happen, right? Like, 325 will not exist unless the team is here. But it took me a long time to really learn that. And then with that also comes like developing culture and having a mission and a vision, which is all stuff that I thought was just like so frou-frou. Like, I didn't want to get involved in any of that stuff. But now I'm learning, especially during this podcast, like I'm learning that this stuff is so important. Was there a stage in your life where you were kind of found out like, hey, actually this stuff really does matter and we need to spend some time implementing it?
Oh, I have so many ways I want to answer that. I will say this. So your experience is one I've heard from many very successful entrepreneurs of that switch. And, when that happens, I had the luxury of probably an interesting word to use there, but not being the founder and being a second generation meant that I was starting from a place of observing. So as opposed to day one creating, day one hoping like hell it's going to work, day one just forging ahead, I had the ability, especially as an intern and even growing up alongside the company, of just watching. I had the wonderful pleasure of going to job sites before I was even remotely involved in the company. I mean, at one point I was a receptionist when I was like 13 years old and got to answer phones and hear from clients. Like, my whole role was observational prior to making any decisions. I never would have gotten there if it hadn't been that way. When all you do is watch, you realize real quick, this isn't one person's decision making. This is a beehive of decisions and activities and everything that come together. And I remember I had this moment. It was when I got to switch from being that observer to decision maker. And it was about the time that I was going from intern and into a couple different positions. Marketing manager maybe was the next one. And I went up in a lift on a job site. It's like one of my favorite moments. Those memories that just stick with you. So I had gone to this job site. It was actually a bit tumultuous. I had been yelled at by a person, a client. It was a whole thing. But then the penultimate moment was I went up in this giant scissor lift. We go up about 70 feet up in the air. I've got my hard hat on. It's just me and the superintendent. And it's the end of the day, so no one else is in the facility. And we just finished. The facility was a warehousing facility. And it was quiet. And I had this moment where I looked around and I realized it was in existence because of the decisions so many people had to make, so many people smarter than I was, so many people who had to work together and as a team and collaborate and solve a problem. This was a project where actually it wasn't supposed to happen. They couldn't actually expand in the direction they wanted to due to some wetland issues. So our team said, okay, let's go up. Let's change the building material. Let's figure out the solution, but let's build up instead of out. And I just had that moment of realizing this is so many people's decisions and collaboration coming together to make this happen in a way that I never could. I get the privilege of seeing it now. And I think that was probably the penultimate moment where not only did I get to observe, I also had that moment of like all of the incredible decision makers at the company and problem solvers. Like, we are a company of problem solvers. That's probably one of the things I love the most. I love puzzles. To the point of people, and to the point of like mission and vision. So I have a strange relationship with mission and vision. We had a corporate, so one of the first things I did after moving beyond marketing and into some other roles, we did want to do corporate strategy. We'd never done it, and quite literally what I was doing at business school. Like, okay, we should go through some strategic planning. So we had someone come in and we did the whole mission, vision, values. And it felt very stale. It didn't resonate, but we stuck with it. It still didn't really resonate. So then a couple of years later, we brought in someone else to do mission, vision, values again. The first version was very stale. So think like our mission is to build buildings for our clients that they really like. Mm-hmm. Our next version was this very like, we are the orange and everyone else is the apple. And like, this is what, so we ended up going from like very practical to like very nebulous, and no one really understood what we were actually talking about. My two experiences in that were this. We didn't talk about mission and vision or purpose or anything for a very long time after that, because my point and what I said to every new hire was, my hope is as a company, we are just living up to who we think we should be, the human beings we should be. And my hope would be that you could ask anyone at this company and say, if you were to name the values of this company, what are they? And my genuine hope was that you'd see a consistency across the company, because it all came down to how the leadership team showed up and how they actually behaved and what their actions actually were. And what I found over and over again with a lot of companies, you'd walk in and there'd be these big splashy, statements and the stuff on the wall. And usually when you peeled back the layers, they weren't living it. They weren't doing the things. That is a huge fear of mine as a company. So we do have this, our purpose is to find a better way for, one another, our communities, and our planet. That sort of snuck up on me, the fact that keeps repeating itself. It's funny. It was something that I had said a couple of years ago, popped up in a couple different places. And then before I knew it, it just sort of like became something we said. Even hearing you say it at the beginning of this scared the shit out of me, because I'm like, are we doing it? Are we actually living the things we say? Are our people, is it go beyond just me with this harebrained idea of where we're headed? Are our people experiencing it and living it and doing it? So I have mixed emotions about missions and visions and values, because I think it's in many ways a cop-out for most companies. It's their way of checking a box and not actually making sure they're doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I had the same experience. So I was challenged myself. I mean, there was a bunch of books and they're all write a mission statement. I'm okay, fine. I'll write a mission statement, whatever. I'll go through it. I'm a big fan of like version 1, version 2, version 3. I think a lot of people get into the trap of like, okay, I wrote this, now I have to go all in on it. Like, no, that's just version 1, like my iPhone is version 9 or whatever. Like, it took a long time for that to happen. Like, this is just version 1.
Aren't we on
right?
like version 15 of phones? You're a little bit behind.
I'm old school. So I wrote my mission. And it was garbage. It was so garbage, but eventually over it, now our mission, and don't ask me to repeat it verbatim, but basically it's to build the community. It really is building the community. And we do that with the hopes that every video that we make can hopefully make a company better. It can make them hire better people. It can make them grow as a company. And if they do better, then we do better. And we can kind of grow together. And we do that through storytelling and video, right? But now that that's out there, now that that's real,
I know.
Yeah, it's like, oh shit. Now I actually have to do that, right? So that's what becomes scary. But I think what becomes really interesting is that I start realizing that like, oh, well, we do that, right? And we can make a couple better steps to make that forward. But I do realize that we do all of that stuff. And I'm sure that's kind of the same way for you. I think as a CEO, you get so pulled away from it, where you're focused more on just like the managerial side of things, or just numbers, or I say I have the worst job. My job is to focus on the problems. Everyone else gets to celebrate the victories. I'm just like, okay, that's great, but like, how do we get better? And so I don't really get to see the impact. Like, I don't really make the videos anymore. So they get to actually see that. So when I get to see it, and then I see the response from our clients, then I'm like, all right, actually, we are doing that. And I feel like that's the same way for you. Like, you're all the buildings and the things that are happening are living up to that mission. But as a CEO, we don't really actually, get to see it as much as like we maybe would want to or hope to. Do you feel that way?
Oh, I do. There are definitely times I do. And I as we talk about it, and this is something I do for a lot of my senior leaders, they'll come and be like, I've done nothing. In the last year, I haven't impacted anything. And I'm like, okay, let's sit down. I'm going to enumerate all of the things you've done in the last year and remind you of what a total badass you actually are. And I think as a company, it's good to have that perspective sometimes too. Again, I think, unfortunately, and similarly, when you're in the CEO seat, there's always this, like, even if you want to celebrate, it's hard to celebrate. You don't really, like, we're not great at celebrating because, at least for me, it's like, what's next? What's next? What's next? To your point, is especially when you start making it about the community, it's like, okay, we've done this, but it's still not enough. It's still not enough. What else are we doing? How can we push harder? What can we do that's even better and better and better? And unfortunately, that means my senior leadership team has picked up on that too, and they're very similarly wired. But you are right. There are things that when I look around, I'm like, okay, we did do it. There's something, we're doing it. It's okay. We're doing it, but we just got to make sure we keep it up.
Mm-hmm. How many people currently work at VIP?
This number has recently changed, but we're pushing about 140 employees right now.
Wow. So it's hard enough for me to run a company of 9 people. How is it to run a company of your size?
It's different. And I mean it in this way. My husband and I opened a brewery a few years back, and it's really his thing. I say we. It's his thing. He's an absolute rock star. And I watch what he does there, and it's very hands-on, roll up your sleeves. You play every role. You play both CEO and brewer, and you're everywhere, and you're everything to everyone. It's not sustainable. So it works right now. It has to, as an entrepreneurial company. That is the nature of the beast. When you start out on day one, you do every single role. And that can carry with you for a really long time, but you do come to that turning point of, this isn't scalable. It can't be scalable if it's just me. I need the team around me. again, I have the luxury of having started with an amazing team. So when I started at the company, our senior leadership team, we have about, of our senior leadership team that we had when I started at the company, I want to say about 30% of that team still remains today. But when I started, the team that was there, they were already in place. And it's that team that makes everything work. It really doesn't come down to my decisions. It really doesn't come down to what I do at the company. It truly comes down to that team and then how that team is creating the next layer of leaders within their team. So we talk a lot at our company about how do leaders, and have that go on because it's the only sustainable way for our company to succeed in the future. So when it comes to running the company, I very rarely think of it as 140 employees and the enormity of that, mostly because then I can't sleep at night and, it's a whole thing. But then there's the reality of, it's really, again, back to it, it's really great people. So I have 9 direct reports. Our senior leadership team is 9 people overall. And each one of those people, I'm very hands-off, which I think works well. In some cases, when I have to dive in, I will dive in. But they are the experts in their field. They're all smarter than I am, hands down. They know their craft inside and out, and I rely on them to know their craft inside and out. And when I have to step in, I'll step in. To your point, if there's something big that comes up or a problem or a client, sure, I can step into those things. But they're to a point where, for the most part, they can manage through those. And we have some pretty funny, pointed conversations over, you're on this team, and we pay you what we pay you, and I try and support you, but that's your thing. You got this. And I would say that happens very infrequently. They are entrepreneurs by themselves and self-starters. So I honestly, to your point of running the company, I couldn't do it without them. And then I don't think they could do it without their teams. And so we're just, again, I know I keep talking about the people, but that's what makes the company work. They're amazing.
When you first became the CEO, were you scared? Were you excited?
So it actually happened faster than I would have ever expected it to. I was both scared and excited. It was this, the excitement came from, we had gone through some transitioning with a family coach, so a generational family coach who would come through and had done a ton of assessments. And basically what I learned out of that assessment was, if I'm not going to do what I'm going to do here at this company, I'm going to end up doing it somewhere else. I'm going to take me with me wherever I go, as one of my senior leadership team members said the other day. Yeah. And for me, it was this incredible opportunity to take something that had been so successful for 45 years and to say, okay, what now? As I mentioned earlier, what now? Where does it go? And really my takeaway was the impact in the community and what we can do, and how in an industry that there's so much potential for change within our industry right now. So I see a ton of potential. So not only do we have our purpose, we have sort of 3 tenets for the vision of the future at the company. And those 3 tenets are rooted in really simple, basic things. So it's not like we're earth-shattering or groundbreaking, but really primarily focused about being purpose-driven, holistic design, which is a conversation for another day, and really around technology and leveraging technology within the holistic design model. But again, when I took over, it was the nervousness, but the excitement that then we get to take that, because those were all ideas that were percolating before. I'd been at the company for so long. It's been 12 years since I've been at the company. So that moment of oh, let's go do it. Let's do it. I can make this happen. We can make this happen. Where do we go now? And I was really given the freedom and the carte blanche to do that. And that was extremely exciting and horrifying, and is still horrifying to this day.
Perfect. I know VIP and you are very involved in the community. Kind of talk more about the culture part of it, or just why is that important to you or to VIP to be involved in the community?
We owe who we are today really to the Central New York community. But beyond that, I'll just talk a little bit in numbers. So when I started at the company, we were pretty representative of women in construction. We were about 9% women in construction in general. The statistics for architecture, engineering, construction, and real estate development for women and minorities from a representation perspective is pretty paltry. And it's something that, although I function on a day-to-day basis, without always having that at the front of my mind, it's still very much a reality. And so in figuring out, what is giving back to the community, there is traditional giving back to the community, but then there is what we think of in terms of how do we create opportunities? How do we create opportunities for underserved communities? How do we make and create spaces that people feel welcome and safe and empowered, and give them the ability to not only come but grow? And so I think that, that for me was the next generation of community. Yes, there's the not-for-profit donating of our time, making sure we're there supporting the infrastructure of not-for-profits within the community and things like that. But then for me was, okay, women and minorities in particular, veterans within our space, thinking about veterans often as well. What can we do? How do we use this 140-person machine to create opportunities for those individuals? And for lack of a better term, break down whatever barriers exist, whether that's barriers to entry, barriers to growth. It's just something we care about. I don't even know how to explain it. It's not like it was this is what we're going to do now. It's just at our core, and that was all started by Dave Nutting and the work that he was doing. And my goal is to keep that going. We have about 40% representation of women on our senior leadership team, a little bit above that now. We are over 30% represented at the company as a whole from women. We have a long way to come from a minority representation perspective. Continue on with our veteran representation and opportunities there. So we just need to keep doing better, keep pushing the envelope. There are places we're going to fail. There are going to be road bumps along the way. We're going to make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes. But we as a company just need to keep learning from those mistakes and not shy away, not stop the work, keep the work going. And just know it's really important work. And to do it not because it's a requirement or do it because somebody says we have to, but do it just because it's the good human thing to do.
And I've pretty much said this in every podcast, but I'll say it again because it just so resonates with me. And I honestly, I learned more from these podcasts than anything else in my life here. But when I first started videos, I just did videos because videos are cool. This video, look, this is cool, right? You like this, it's cool. But I quickly realized that videos tell stories. They make an impact. They can showcase someone's whole life and they can grow a business, right? It leads back to our mission. And to me now, videos solve problems. And so when I hear you say all of that, on the outside perspective, most people probably think, well, that's just a house. That's just a building. But there's so much more that goes into it, either from the design to the materials to the place to everything that it's causing. And I think that's once you make that switch into how things are much bigger and that they can do so much more and mean so much more to people, I think it just really changes your perspective of that why and what it actually means to do this kind of work.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think one of the interesting pieces of that too is a lot of times, and I even hesitate sometimes having these conversations, even talking about holistic design, sustainability, green, impact, a lot of those terms, because oddly enough, they can be polarizing. And as a company, one of the things that we try and really focus on are what small decision can you make today that will have a big impact tomorrow? And when we think about our buildings, that's one of the things we think about. So our space and our new office space really takes that into account, really small. And this has nothing to do with the building, but as a business, just doing a compost program, simple, straightforward, but with an idea that in the long run, it has a much bigger impact. Daylight harvesting, things like that. So again, these are not huge break the bank decisions we made. And that's what we really want to bring to our clients too, because sometimes when we talk about this, they're like, but it is just a building and I don't really want to think about all these things. And then we remind them here are some of the small things you can do that will have a huge impact on your employees and a huge impact overall on your hiring and what that can look like. So we try and offer that lens without it being this big, invest millions of dollars and maybe you'll see a return. But what's one or two really impactful small things you can do today for your people?
Well, I got one last tangent, and then I'll have to ask my last three questions here. So we worked with this one company, it's a tech company, and they had a barber shop inside of their office, and they had a barber come once a week or every other Thursday or something, and I had to film that, right? Because there was a cool office, and it's that's cool. That's really neat. That's something. And then I had a chance to talk to the owner, and they started talking about how one of their employees needed to get a haircut, but had to do it after work. It was during like their kids' soccer practice, and it took time away from their family. So being able to get a haircut by a barber in your office during office hours wasn't just like cool. It was like time with your family, being important, and I find that just so interesting because I don't think a lot of people see these like bigger, like, what does this actually mean? What does this actually do? So I don't know, very cool stuff. Okay, last 3 questions that we ask everyone here, Meg. What is your favorite book or a book that you want to recommend to our audience, and why?
Oh my gosh, this is the funniest. This question makes me chuckle because in my brain, I'm like, do we go with professional Meg with all of like the business books that I would offer to everybody, or do we go with the real Meg?
That's how I feel about this question too.
So here's the deal. I read a lot of business books, but I also read a lot to escape and to go to a place where I can just like experience something else. And so I'm actually going to answer with the Harry Potter series because it is hands down one of my favorites. Mm-hmm. And sometimes as CEOs, we need to not have to be so CEO-like, mm-hmm. and you just have to lean in something that's a little bit weird.
Is there a favorite Harry Potter book out of the series?
Number 4.
Okay, you answered that so quick. I wasn't expecting that. All right, perfect.
So good.
Awesome. I have the same experience that you do. Right now, I'm literally listening to Lord of the Rings as I go to work every day. Because I'm sick of listening and reading business books all the time.
All the time.
I've read a lot of business books, and I will go back to them. But yeah, every once, let's give me something different.
Yep.
All right.
100%.
Harry Potter, specifically book number 4. I like it. Okay, so you've been doing this for quite some time. What keeps you motivated?
I gotta say, it's the people. I'm going to keep saying it over and over and over again. People who are willing to give of their time to recognize our vision and where we're headed, and who want to be a part of that and want to be a part of something bigger, and who are just damn good human beings at their core.
Perfect. All right, last question. What excites you most about Central New York today?
This is such an interesting question because obviously there's a lot of energy. There's a lot of positivity happening at the moment. And recently I had a conversation with someone, and I think it really goes down to the fact that I'm starting to actually see some of our biggest naysayers like show a glimmer of like hope and excitement. And that is always to me like such a good, great telltale sign. But I think even beyond that, I'm seeing an open-mindedness. I'm seeing innovation and creativity that maybe I haven't always seen in this way. And I'm seeing a community that's willing to accept it and open arms to it, wanting to push the bounds. One of the things that can really get us in CNY is that negativity that can just get you. You have the big idea. That's something I always tell people, like, if you're going to run a company someday, you're going to have a big idea, and 80% of the world is going to shoot that big idea down. You have to have the fortitude to just keep going. But I find in this community for a while, it was really like that. You just turn a corner and people are like, nah. And I would say even with our company and where we're headed, I'm seeing people excited and wanting to be a part of it and wanting to create and imagine a better place. And people are finally in a place where they're like, oh, imagine 5, 10, 15 years, what this could really be like and what it could really be like for my kids and for their children, and what that impact could be. So, it's the energy, it's the excitement, but it's the glimmer of positivity from those that I may not have seen it from before.
Love that. All right. Well, thank you, Meg.
Thank you.
If you want to learn more about Meg, you can follow her on LinkedIn at Meg Tidd and check out VIPstructures.com to see all of their work in the community. And be sure to follow In the Studio with 325 for more conversations with extraordinary people every Monday.